discussion on various policy amendments and other matters which you may or may not want to contribute to. The whole point of this conference, this AGM, if you like, is to set a stall out. It's a sign of intention. This is how we see ourselves developing and progressing over the years to come. Hopefully with more people, but this is early days. This party has only been in active existence for roughly 12 months. We launched in February. Before that, there was various meetings in Coventry and other places such as Yorkshire and the North East before we managed to get on our feet. We've already fought 3 elections in May, plus another by-election, which Kevin Stafford, sitting to my right here, fought in Loughborough just last month. And there's examples of Kevin's literature, which most of you have probably seen if you received the mail shot. So this conference is basically to set our stall out and to show to people here and at home watching this video how we intend this party to move forward, how we see it developing, and how we see the progression from what is, as Andrew Bronze quite aptly said, a potential party to a successor party and to eventually the premier party of the nationalist scene in this country. I'm pretty sure that almost everyone in this room has either been a member or associated with the BNP in various levels. But the BNP, I'm afraid, is dead. One of the things that's beyond our control is how the BNP pans out over the next 6 to 12 months with the European elections coming up in May, where they are widely expected to be trounced. And if you look at the recent by-elections that the BNP have contested, the most recent one in Stoke, just last week, I think. Now, Stoke was an area where the BNP had done well, councillors elected. It was at one point the official opposition on the council, and it polled less than 3% in a council by-election in Stoke. Previous by-election attempts by the BNP have been equally dismal. Again, in former strongholds, not in random places, but Barnsley, Barton and Dagenham, Rotherham, all votes of less than 5%, less than 2% in some places. So that's one thing that's beyond our control, what happens to the BNP over the next 6 to 12 months. But it will impact on how we grow and develop. Because obviously, most if not all of us are refugees, political refugees from the BNP, and we foresee, at least in the early stages, the early activists, organisers and other cadres from the BNP joining us and inflating our ranks. Another factor that's beyond our control is what happens to UKIP in the next 12 to 18 months. Because not only do you have the European elections next year, you've also got the general election scheduled for 2015. And most of you will probably know that UKIP are on a roll. And if you look at the by-elections, particularly in England, that UKIP are contesting, it's very rare for them to fall below 15% now. And I looked at some statistics in September of this year, how many by-elections UKIP had contested, where they'd finished second place, where they'd finished first place, compared to the 12 months prior to that. And the number of by-election contestants expanded, their results are much improved, plus they won 3 seats in September of this year compared to none last year. And their second places were in double figures compared to single figures previously. So we have to acknowledge that UKIP have usurped the BNP when the BNP were looking as though they would be the premier party, and all of us took part in that. Andrew Bronze, sitting to my right, was part of that progress, elected in 2009 as a member of the European Parliament. The BNP looked as though it was going somewhere at that point. Flawed as it was, and ultimately damaged as it turned out to be. And many of you have got, no doubt, stories and other anecdotes of how damaged and flawed it was. But we've moved on now. Those things we can't control. We can only observe, react, respond. We can't control what's going to happen to the BNP or UKIP in the next 12 to 18 months. What we can do is try and attempt to supplant the BNP and challenge UKIP. And last year in Loughborough, Kevin Stafford did just that. As I said, the BNP and the other splinter groups and the other political parties where people from the BNP have went to, they have sunk without trace when up against UKIP, or even when they haven't been up against UKIP, the polling's been pretty poor. But Kevin managed to get 10% of the vote against UKIP's 12% in a safe Labour ward that was multi-ethnic. And when myself and Ken went down to help on a very, very rainy day, where we got soaked and wet canvassing and handed out leaflets, there's a big, huge mosque in the middle of the ward. So that indicates how well Kevin did in that specific ward. That 10% vote. Not a million miles away from UKIP, and we weren't steamrolled by anyone. Plus, as most of you will know, we didn't finish last either. We beat the Liberal Democrats, which I remind you is part of the coalition government in this country. So we beat a government party. And that is how we intend to roll out this party, both at an electoral level, and at an organisational level. And hopefully, via our constitution and via the people that choose to lead our party, avoiding the flaws and the mistakes that have happened previously in the BNP and in other parties. But I'm going to quickly move on and introduce Kevin Stafford, who's actually going to talk about that election last month. So a round of applause, please, for Kevin Stafford.
Morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me all right, because unlike Kevin, I don't have a very loud, strident voice. So I hope you can hear me okay. This is just an overview of the elections that the party's held since it was formed in February. There have been 4 elections, local elections. 3 of them were county council elections, and the most recent one was a borough council election. One of the county council elections was in Lancashire, in Pendle, where Gary Topping stood. The other 2 were in Leicestershire, where Graham Partner and myself stood. I stood in Loughborough South, Graham stood in Colville. And then the 4th one was a borough council election, the most recent one in Charnwood Borough Council, where I stood again. I'll give you the results. Pendle was the least satisfactory result for reasons that are not entirely clear. The results were, there were 5 candidates. Lib Dems came first with 31.8, Labour came second with 26, Conservatives third with 25.5, BNP 12.7 came fourth, and finally Brit Dems fifth with 4%. It was assumed at the time that people thought that we shouldn't have been competing against the BNP, and that there was some bad blood between the helpers of both parties. And that's possible. We don't know for sure. But that was the least of the satisfactory of the results. In Colville, again, Leicestershire County Council, where Graham Partner stood, Labour came first, with 44.7%. UKIP came second with 28.5%, where they hadn't stood in that ward, that district before. They get a good result because of their national profile, as much as anything. Third was Conservatives at 16.4%. Graham at Brit Dems 7.4% came fourth, and he beat the Lib Dems with 2.9%. So it was a reasonable result, considering a party that nobody had ever heard of before. In Loughborough South, I stood at the same time. This was in May 2nd. Labour came first with 51.8%. Conservatives second with 32.9%. Myself, Brit Dem, came again 7.4%, exactly the same as Graham. Ahead of the Lib Dems in fourth place with 5.8%, and a trade union against cuts person, an independent, who got 2.1%. So Graham and I both got 7.4%, which we thought at the time was reasonable for a party that, again, that nobody had really heard of. Just for comparison, in Leicestershire, the BNP was standing in 7 seats, and they got 8.5, 9.4, 8.9, 11.9, 8.5, 10.5, and 3. I don't know why that was particularly low. The average was 10%, was the BNP result at the same time in the same county council elections in Leicestershire. So the result of Graham and myself at 7.4 wasn't far behind a party that's been around for 20 years or so. Turning to the fourth election, this is the most recent one, Charnwood Borough Council by-election, again in Leicestershire, in Loughborough. 5 candidates. It's a deprived area, very enriched, with a mosque, as Kevin said. It's always been traditionally very strong Labour. And that Labour lead didn't change. Labour came first with 61.4%. They actually increased their lead over the previous time. Conservatives were second, which is 14.1%. UKIP were third with 12.3%. Myself, Brit Dem, 9.41%. And Lib Dems last with 2.8%. The Lib Dems didn't put out any leaflets at all, which perhaps explains their low result. But I think the Conservative candidate lady was quite disappointed, and she was almost tearful at the count. She expected to do a lot better. And UKIP really should have done better with their high national profile. But in this case, they didn't do too well. The Labour candidate was seen handing out leaflets on the Friday before election day outside the mosque at the end of Friday prayers, accompanied by the Asian county councillor who was by her side to endorse her. So they were definitely going for the ethnic vote, for the Muslim vote. And it seems to have worked. I've got leaflets here from those 2 elections that I took part in, both my own and the opposition's. And there is a leaflet there from the Tory candidate saying Happy Eid to the Muslims, which was just really sucking up to them. Anyway, those are the results. On the whole, they were not bad for a party that was just starting. We hope to do better. We hope to improve our techniques, and any suggestions are always welcome.
As Kevin mentioned towards the end, Ken will be doing a half-hour slot on fighting election campaigns and the basic mechanics and nuts and bolts of taking part in elections, because Ken has a lot of experience of fighting elections in the northeast of England and further afield. And it was Ken who produced almost all of the literature that you've got in front of you for Kevin Stafford. And obviously he's quite sort of important to the operation at this stage, because it'll more likely be Ken who will be producing most of the literature in the subsequent campaigns that we fight. Probably not this year, but definitely next May and beyond. But we're always looking for people to help, for people to write leaflets, design leaflets, ideas, and even to use digital duplicators and print off their own leaflets, which would take a lot of the pressure away from Ken. Obviously, we need to have a look at what you're actually putting out, because it could be a legal minefield in terms of libel and such like. But Ken will be discussing that after our next 2 speakers, who I will introduce now.